Alex, I'm pleased to announce the Giant Bomb has made the decision to hire you on full time.
Guys, this has been a dream for so long, for so long, for so long.
You
I'm
and
very
Yoshi have been
proud.
hired as the new Giant Bomb announcers today. I know there's been a lot of speculation about it. Uh, Jeff's actions in the
It'd be
last
a hell of
in the last year or so have just been a smokescreen. It's finally just get that green guy back on board.
it's been a swerve all along, but I'm glad to finally get the announcement out there. I'm ready to finally start in on my job, and thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so there's some stuff going on the site. Not ours to announce. I'm sure
Nope.
there'll be news soon in some capacity.
Yeah,
Uh,
seems likely.
how was your weekend?
It was all right. Let's see, what did I do this weekend? I played a lot more Shovel Knight, which I don't really have much to add to anything I said on Friday about that game. As I go deeper and deeper into it, I'm enjoying it more and more.
Yeah.
Uh, the challenge level in that game is something that I think is actually pretty spectacular. We've talked before about how like the controls are really good, the mechanics are all really good, but it's just that right level of tough to where I feel like I can get over the hump without just getting super frustrated. Like it's that Mega Man 2 and 3 kind of level of hard, I feel like.
Their checkpoint system is really well done as well,
Yeah.
and I like the fact that you can destroy the checkpoints. You can
Yes.
break them. So if you there's an achievement, well, a feat is what they call it. I'm sure it'll be an achievement if it ever comes to. Well, I guess it's on Steam. And they're still called feats there. Anyway, one of the feats is to destroy all of the checkpoints in the game, which then means you have to finish those games in a more traditional manner that you would have for a lot of those games back in the day, where it's just you get to beginning to end. Like maybe there's a checkpoint, at the boss or something, but by and large, you just need to kind of get through the gauntlet. And Shovel Knight has some really you always feel like you make it through just enough screens where you're starting to sweat it, and you're very thankful that that checkpoint has showed up.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely like in the early goings. I thought, oh well, I'm doing well in these bit early levels, so I'm just going to start destroying some of these checkpoints, see what happens. Then a couple of them started fucking me over, where I realized that there is actually some considerable risk involved with getting rid of those. So finding the right balance between well, that was super easy, and oh god, I never want to do that again is a nice little trick there. Yeah, I still got a little ways to go in that one, but I am enjoying the hell out of it so far. That was actually the game I probably spent the most time with this weekend. I downloaded a couple of things from the Steam sale, but I have not actually played any of it because I mostly just played Shovel Knight and fucking more Hearthstone, because god damn it, whenever I'm just laying on the couch, that is just the thing that I just keep popping open for no goddamn reason. I just losing all the hours to that game still.
In Shovel Knight, if you haven't used it yet, you should learn to abuse it because this I didn't get into this as much in my review, but as I started thinking more about how I felt about the game's difficulty, and just being that I'm a huge fan of these types of games, I've played a lot of them, so like my perception of easy is different than others, which is why I don't even really knock the game. I think it has a pretty brilliant difficulty curve. I was just looking for something a little harder, but the phase locket, you can really break that game using the phase locket. It's balanced pretty well, but the phase locket, have you gotten that item?
I have gotten that item. I haven't fucked
Okay.
around with it too much yet, but yeah, I have it.
Yeah, so you should learn to fuck around with the phase locket. The phase locket
Okay.
allows you to become invincible for a brief moment in time, and you can execute the phase locket before you have phased out of the phase locket. So you can combo together some pretty decent stretches of time where you cannot be hurt, and that includes the only thing that can kill you at that point is a pit of death. The spikes, which can otherwise take you on one hit. You can just walk along spikes when you have the phase locket. And what I found was that moments where I'd get into trouble, especially with a boss, I just flip on the phase locket, and that would, you can just sit there, put the phase locket on, and then just whack away at the guy, and I could get half the health of a boss done in a couple of uses of the phase locket. Like I found that item to be a little much, but also I always try and weigh that against, well, for folks that maybe normally find these games frustrating and wish stuff like that didn't exist, maybe that's a sort of an equalizer that allows them to enjoy a game like this a little bit more.
I think you just said the words phase locket so many times that it just sort of started to turn into white noise. Like I just stopped hearing what you were actually saying, but I do understand what you're presenting to me, and yes, you're right. I should probably take more advantage of that.
Just lock it up.
Especially now. Okay, that was going to happen, wasn't it? All right. So yeah, that was kind of my video game weekend. The rest of the time, I went and saw Snowpiercer on Saturday.
How was that? I didn't get a chance to watch that this weekend because my wife and I have gotten sucked into Orange is the New Black, which took up the time that we would normally be watching a movie during the weekend. But
right.
Is it good? I want it to be good.
It is really good.
Okay.
It's Bong Joon-ho who made The Host, which I imagine you've seen, it being a monster movie. And he also made a movie called Mother a few years ago, which was like a sort of drama, psychological thriller type thing, which I actually think is his best movie.
Yeah, Mother's good. Mother is
amazing.
Very different than The Host, but
very different than kind of the other stuff he's made, but it's pretty spectacular. This is his first English language directed movie. It has a really intense cast that includes Chris Evans, Tilda Swinton, like Alison Pill, John Hurt, a variety of other people, like Octavia Spencer's in it, and it's a sci-fi movie set in a near future scenario where we try to combat global warming with some sort of chemical that accidentally freezes the Earth. And the only people who are still alive on this Earth are people who have taken up on this rattling arc, which is a train that was built by a crazy billionaire that has a self-propelling engine and is the only
sure.
Yeah, why not? Because fuck it, why not? And it's the only thing that is keeping them from freezing to death outside. And so the whole thing is just a giant class metaphor. Like the rich and the powerful live up front.
Right.
The poor live in the back and are just sort of used at the pleasure of the rich. And it is literally about the poor fighting their way up car by car to the front as best they can in a sort of revolution. And while the metaphor is very obvious in a way that sometimes can be bad in these kinds of movies, the actual storytelling and the characters and the acting and just kind of the pacing of all of it is exceedingly well done. It definitely wears its politics on its sleeve, but it presents them in a way that is not super obnoxious and just obnoxious. That in a lot of ways it is probably the movie that Elysium should have been. In that it is a much smarter, much more interesting movie that it kind of goes beyond just that basic premise of we're going to fight our way to the top. So I definitely appreciate it a lot more than that movie. It doesn't all work. There are some pieces that if you sit there and you try and think about them a little too much, like they definitely don't fit together, but it's about as exciting a movie I've seen in theaters in a good long while, especially this year where there really hasn't been very much that's gotten me that excited. There's been a couple of fun things here and there, but there haven't been like a lot of really good, like exciting action movies. That was definitely one where it's like these fight sequences are super brutal in a way that I have not seen in a movie in a good long while, and the just sort of like the design and the production of the whole thing is pretty incredible. I would definitely recommend you check that out, and frankly, I'd probably recommend it to just about anyone.
Yeah, I think the trailers for that movie have been pretty bad. I think the trailers have really played up the kooky sci-fi concept that is what seems to be, from what you're saying, just a loose, justification for telling a more high concept class struggle story,
right?
As opposed to the trailers, and obviously this film, if you've read about the drama with the Weinstein Company and the script and stuff like that, it wouldn't surprise me if the marketing is not necessarily 100% reflective of what seems to be at the heart of this film, because like the sci-fi stuff didn't really this perpetual motion engine and blah 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 blah. I was like, oh, I can't, especially with much smarter sci-fi fare coming out this summer. All the reviews for This one is Dawn of the Planet of the Apes or Rise of Planet of the Dawn.
Rise of I don't. You know what? I don't even know.
The new one. That
yeah.
sounds like it's amazing. All the reviews that came
Franco
out
list.
last. Yeah, all the reviews that were coming out last week for the new one sound fantastic, and that's like okay, it's still within the realm of apes becoming humans. It's a little, it's sci-fi, so you just go with it. But yeah.
Did you see the last one though?
Yeah, it was surprisingly good, despite my general disdain for James Franco. I don't actively hate him. He just sort of bothers me sometimes, and so
I like him when he's playing a ridiculous character. Like a Spring Breakers is a perfect place for a James Franco. I don't like him as a leading man in most things. I think he was good in the Planet of the Apes movie, but in most cases when he's just like sort of like the main protagonist, that's just like a normal dude. Like I don't think he's very good.
Yeah, and so also I'm a huge fan of Matt Reeves, and he wrote and directed, or worked on the story for this new one, and yeah, I'm excited about it, and all the Andy Serkis Caesar stuff is fantastic. I watched The Leftovers last night. Did you watch that?
So I was watching the Money in the Bank wrestling pay-per-view.
Right, that's right. I should have. Okay, all right, then let's back up. How was your pay-per-view?
It was actually pretty good, all things considered. It was weird because going into the show, they had only announced 4 matches, 2 of which were the main like ladder match type crazy things. So there was a lot of weird filler in there with like people that they had not advertised to do stuff because they needed to fill 3 hours. But even that stuff was relatively entertaining. And the 2 ladder matches. Have you watched any wrestling really at all ever?
Yeah. In the 90s.
Okay, but so you know like what a ladder match is, and you know how those tend to work, right? Yeah. So the thing that they've done in recent years is that they've no longer just relegated it to like we put a ladder out there and they use that ladder. Like the ring is always surrounded by ladders, and there are ladders going all the way up the ramp too. So like there are times when there will be like 5 ladders kind of scattered throughout the ring, and people just be throwing them and swinging them around. There are people getting tossed and like power bombed onto ladders, and it is ridiculous and looks like the most painful goddamn thing in the world. They did a lot of that last night, and it was pretty exciting and pretty incredible. And then John Cena won, which is never the thing.
That was going to be my second question.
John Cena won. He overcame the odds, and he won.
Oh, did he?
As John Cena does. He had, to be absolutely fair, it had been weeks since he overcame the odds, and that's like an abnormally long time for him. So he was probably due, yeah. So not a great ending, but a pretty entertaining show all around. And Tina Meany and Adam Rosenberg from Digital Trends came over and watched with us, and it was a good time. But yeah, so I did not watch The Leftovers. I have it taped. I'm going to probably watch it tonight or tomorrow. How did that show find you? I'm very curious about it.
It's good. It is obviously, if you followed the melodrama of Damon Lindelof's personal history with the backlash to Lost. It very much feels like a show that comes from one of the guys who when Lost was on, it was Damon Lindelof and Carlton Cuse. They were showrunners, but Damon Lindelof was there with J.J. Abrams when they originally broke the ideas for the show. So if you have to credit one person more than the other, it was more Damon Lindelof. But that guy's been flogged, Lost, and then he was blamed for Prometheus, even though it really seems like Ridley Scott's the one that fucked that up.
Yeah.
And if you read between the lines and all the Damon Lindelof interviews where he would talk about the script, he kind of being like, sometimes you're brought into a movie and people ask you to put ideas in those movies, and because you're hired to do that, that's what you put in those movies. Not completely excusing him, but I think someone was sort of dumped on unequally in that scenario. But then again, people might call me a Lost apologist, so I know I wear Lost on my sleeve. I understand where I'm coming from. Yes,
very obviously.
But The Leftovers, I think, even if you didn't care for Lost, I think it's great because it's sort of it's a show that just uses a high end, a high concept of a non-religious rapture as a means to tell a really dispiriting, depressing story about the randomness in death and like how human behavior immediately goes completely wrong, like the moment you start pulling out like Jenga pieces of societal structure.
Right.
Like it's basically like what would happen if we were all faced with something we could not explain. And in most sci-fi tends to go with the more, or what you would think is the more interesting route of what happens in the immediate moments as society begins to unfold. And
Right.
The Leftovers just says, let's move past that. And it just starts 3 years later with society functioning, on the surface as though everything has gone back to normal. But in the background, you start to get you start to pick up on what's happening. There's a Senate committee that has concluded that there is no rational explanation for what happened. They haven't come down on religion or science or anything like that. It's just, hey, 2% of the world's population, 180 million people, just disappeared overnight. We don't have an explanation for it. Go on with your life. And the show is basically just exploring, wow, that would really fuck a lot of people up.
Yeah.
If you couldn't explain it. And it stays there. There are moments where, it's obviously going to, there's a deer that it seems the deer is looking at the guy. But it seems like the show is instead not trying to necessarily suggest there are hidden meanings and answers, but more that when faced with stuff like this, just like when people are faced with death, the death of a loved one, people tend to look for meaning. Mm-hmm. So I think the show will actually, in a weird meta way, comment on the sort of thing that Lost did, which was actually embed hidden meaning in the world by embedding hidden meaning that doesn't mean anything because people are just looking for it. If that
right.
makes any sense.
Yeah, so they're throwing some red herrings in there, but the greater conceit is that there is no greater meaning to be found in all this. You can't explain it, so this is just an exploration of what people try to do in those kinds of situations.
Yeah, they're red herrings for the characters, not
right.
the audience. The audience is aware that they are red herrings or that people are ascribing meaning where there is none, and then that's just a way of people sort of rationalizing their way through a long worldwide grieving process. It's interesting. It's really dark. I've heard it only gets darker. All the reviews I've read were like, hey, do you want to not feel good this summer? Watch The Leftovers.
I do want to not feel good this summer. This is the feel bad summer of all time, and I am definitely looking forward to hating myself. So this should be good. Yeah, I've been looking for a show like that for a while. It's not like there's any shortage of downer TV on right now, but not a lot of it is very good in my opinion. So, I've been itching to try something new. Maybe this will be it. Maybe it won't. I don't know. But as someone who digs post-apocalyptic stuff, especially when it's not just here's another bunch of people scavenging through the ruined society, kind of stuff, because that's kind of been done to death. I like the idea of a post-apocalypse where there wasn't really an apocalypse. It's just that no one knows what to do anymore. That sounds interesting to me.
Yeah. So it's pretty good.
Cool.
I don't know. I guess we could talk about video games.
I mean, I talked about Shovel Knight. That's a video game. We're done with that for today. We've had enough. What did you play this weekend? Did you jump into anything?
I continued down the Watch Dogs path. A game that it's a good time filler. I could see it's if that game was not $60. There are worse things you could do with your money. More, I've talked about this before, but more than anything, that game just bums me out because it's disappointing. I feel like it just does so little with its premise. I mean, this is a game ostensibly about hacking, in which at every turn the game says, what would make this easier? Just shooting that dude in the head.
Yeah.
The game does present you with options in a lot of scenarios in which you can hack your way through. But here's the thing. Even the hacking encourages killing. So most of the hacking that you're allowed to do is either exploding transformers or blowing up steam pipes or triggering grenades on people's vests or lifting up objects in the environment that allow you to use them as cover. So yes, you can use hacking to make situations easier, but even the hacking tends to fall on the side of making it easier for you to kill everyone. And it just doesn't... It's just really frustrating because the game, I feel like it would be a really interesting... the game could be a lot more interesting if they had played into that hand a little bit more. It's fine if it just wants to be Grand Theft Auto with light hacking. It's just that the main character is this, master hacker that hangs out with all these other master hackers, and yet you can't really put any of that to good use. It's more just a special effect to give you some magic powers that has some sort of grounding in reality. And
Just think of the guns as the ultimate hacking tool. Think of bullets like you shooting bullets as human, like you're hacking people to death with guns. That's what that is. That's how it all fits together.
like, look at Quadrilateral Cowboy. That's a fucking game about hacking.
Sure,
And
yes.
that game, obviously is going to one extreme. If you're not familiar with Quadrilateral Cowboy, which, like, God, every time I see a little bit of that game, I am extremely excited about it because it's a game that seems like it's going to be able to recreate the sense or the pleasure that folks must get, I assume folks get, from hacking for people that don't know how to program.
Right.
You're still doing some light abstract programming in Quadrilateral Cowboy, but that's also a title that you should try and not say too many times. Those games could not be on polar opposites there, where you have one that's actually trying to abstract hacking and give you a sense of what it's like to program objects in the world and sort of bend them to your will, whereas Watch Dogs is more or less, it's a magical phone that allows you to bend things to your whim. And it's just I've spent all of my skill points in Watch Dogs on hacking, which has made it at least a little bit more enjoyable. Like, if you go full in on the skill tree, you do get some more options, but it's like now I'm getting a couple of interesting options, 8/10 through the game, which it would have been nice to have those earlier. It just, man, Watch Dogs feels like I have not played a game that feels more stapled together in a long, long time. It's just, the development of that game, I imagine, must have been fairly, I guess interesting would be a word, but it feels like, hey guys, just put this shit together and ship it. We'll figure out what we're gonna do the next time around. But it works for Ubisoft, so I can't really complain about their. I can complain about their approach, but it seems to be doing pretty well for them.
Yeah, we're never actually going to hear the story about that game's development, I'm guessing. Or if we do, it's going to be after a whole bunch of people who made that game either are laid off or quit that company, and their non-disclosure agreements eventually expire, which is unfortunate because I bet, like you said, I bet there's a really good story behind how everything in that game came to be exactly the way it is.
I mean, it might be as simple. It's probably just as simple as we got to ship that game. I don't care what you have to do. Just put it together. And get it out the door.
I guarantee that's the onus behind it, but I bet some of the conversations that had to be had among people to make that game into something shippable were probably pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Is all I'm implying.
Yeah. That's really all I play, because that game is not short. It's not exceptionally long. I'm pretty close to the end. I finished up Act 3? And there are 5, but 5 doesn't count. It's basically just an epilogue mission. So I have like 6 or 7 missions left. So I'm gonna try and finish that up before I head to Wisconsin for family stuff this weekend.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin.
It's freedom. Gotta celebrate freedom this week.
Yes, I've been told freedom was born this week.
Yeah, it seems like an all right thing.
You know who's gonna be in town this weekend?
Who's gonna be in town this weekend?
Kara Ellison.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, I think I might end up going hang out with her and some other people at some point, or at least that was bandied about during drinks earlier this week. But yeah, that might happen. Apparently, she's here for like weeks, so she tends to do.
She just cruises from city to city, not giving a fuck.
Crashing on couches, writing about video games, writing about life. It's a hell of a lifestyle she's got going on.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting. If people have questions they want to drop in the chat, we can get some stuff after we look at a little bit of news. There's a little bit of stuff, not that much going on. Here's an interesting one.
Okay.
That I thought had inspired a bit of debate over the weekend. So I have not played, but I am familiar with, as I assume you are, Planetary Annihilation.
I'm aware of it, yeah.
Yeah, the Uber RTS that is currently in early access. They were on Kickstarter. So someone spotted that game was available at retail, like it's early access edition of Planetary Annihilation.
Wait, what?
Comes with a free upgrade to the full game, is what the box says.
Oh.
But it is currently selling at retail. I'm not sure exactly where. I'm trying to pick that up from the story I'm glancing at, but it is at retail for $39.99. It's an early access game. and then obviously because you bought early access, you get access to the full game when it's finished. But for some reason, this has really rubbed people the wrong way. I'm wondering before I weigh in, I'm wondering what you think about that.
I'm guessing the reason it rubs people the wrong way is the idea that early access as a retail product you can buy in stores is inherently kind of shady. I'm not sure that it is because it's just a different way of selling the same product you're selling digitally, which I think it's weird. I don't know why you would put that in stores to begin with. But that said, I don't think it's any shadier than just like selling a game in early access. It's the same basic idea. It's just that you're putting a box copy in a store, which again, I think is a little odd. I don't know why you would do that to begin with. But inherently, you're still selling the same product you'd be selling digitally. So I don't necessarily think it's any worse, unless it's like a cost thing. I don't really see a huge issue with it other than it being kind of bizarre.
Yeah, how is it? This is more. You're getting. This is better than a pre-order.
Have we verified like what stores this was in, like where it was being sold?
Let's see if I can. Let's see. Game Informer has a story. Let's see. Game Informer. We've reached out to developer Uber to ask about selling an early access game at retail. John Maver, one of the directors of the game, wrote in an email to Game Informer. At Uber, we've been trying really hard to innovate on business models during the entire development of Planetary Annihilation. We had planned to do a retail release all along, and the early access box came as part of an experimental attitude. Since early access works so well, our partners at Nordic thought it would be worth trying an early access retail edition, and we agreed it was a cool idea. It doesn't say where, although the let's see. I don't think it's $39.99. I think it is. Oh, okay, yeah, it's got a Peggy logo, so that's UK money. That's Europe money. I don't know what that translates to, but whatever. It's over $20.
Right.
But I guess I could see the kind of person these days, other than someone that's going into retail because they want to own a box, like they really want the physical edition of the game, either because it comes with some sort of goodies or this game's really important to them, so they want to own a physical edition of the box. It can seem like, does someone know what early access means? The kind of typical consumer that is going to buy a game? I think that maybe might be where it's rubbing people a little bit the wrong way, is that also that a retail version sort of suggests the game is done.
Yeah.
You know, like the traditional idea of a box is that you're buying a finished game at a store, as opposed to this where you are buying access to a game that will eventually be done, and then one assumes will also then be sold at a store.
Well, as someone in the chat mentioned, though, I mean, to be fair, Big Rigs was a boxed game that was sold in stores. So, I mean, you can't. That is not necessarily a guarantee. It should be a guarantor, but it is not. But yeah, that's a fair point. Like the notion that the presumption being that the consumer who is going out and buying boxed PC games doesn't necessarily know what early access is, or doesn't necessarily know what any of this other shit means. That's fair. There is a certain amount of onus that I think is on the consumer to, kind of be somewhat informed about what these things are. I have a hard time envisioning some random person who doesn't know very much about video games just walking into a store going, Planetary Annihilation, that sounds great, and then just buying that, like sight unseen. That said, I still don't think it's a huge deal, because if it says early access on the box, they're doing this in a limited capacity, and it's still the same thing you'd be buying digitally. I don't think it's bad. I do think it's weird, but I don't think it's inherently an awful thing. That's just me. That's where I come out on it.
Yeah, I think the reason it's inspiring, sort of like a lot of hand wringing, is because well, I think people are getting a little bit uncomfortable with the continued spread, if that's the right terminology.
Sure.
Like, are games ever finished these days? I think there's like an increasing feeling, like, you look at like Battlefield 4, right?
Right.
A game that had an enormous amount of retail success, despite the fact that it was completely fucked at launch, and it does not appear that EA was punished in any sort of capacity for shipping a broken, unfinished game that certainly did not have any early access moniker. So I think there's maybe just a general sort of distrust that comes along with this, a little just not knowing who to believe, what to believe, and also I think there's a culture shift that's happening where there are demographics of people that play games that are completely comfortable with early access, and demographics of players who are deeply uncomfortable with the idea of early access.
Sure.
I think out of this idea that you don't know what you're getting.
Yeah, you don't. You definitely don't know what you're getting, and I mean, I don't have anything to add to this. I've kind of said my piece on it. I think that if someone is going in and just buying Planetary Annihilation in a box and they are upset that they have gotten an early access product, even though it says early access on the box, then I kind of can't do anything to help that person. I think that, again, this sounds like it's a one-off thing. It's kind of a limited release. It's not something that is necessarily looking to become a widespread thing. I think if it does become a widespread thing, that is weird. I don't think it should necessarily. But, again, this is the thing that they are currently selling on Steam. It is, I have my own reservations about early access in general. I think that there is still a certain amount of weirdness around that. But I also think that they're just selling the same product they'd be selling otherwise, and that's fine. They should do that. That's a weird thing. Whoever gets that boxed copy is going to treasure that always, I'm sure. But whatever.
My guess
in
is
3 years there aren't going to be boxed copies of anything anymore, so who cares?
Yeah, you know what? I bet no one buys Planetary Annihilation at early access. I bet there is a lot of hand wringing over what it means, but I cannot imagine it's going to move a lot of copies. It really does seem like Uber is actually being earnest in their response, which is to say, Nordic said, "Do you want to try this?" And Uber said, "Why not?"
Yeah.
Because obviously they're a company that is trying to explore what exactly the early access business model means. I mean, there's been questions. One of the interesting ones I've seen developers wrestle with is the idea of putting early access games on sale. So let's take one extreme. Is still a kind of Planetary Annihilation, which I don't know if it was this summer sale or if it was in a recent sale, but the game was significantly off its normal price. Let me pull up Planetary Annihilation. Yeah, right now it is. Oh no, wait, that's. Let's see. This is $16.99, but I think it's. Okay, it's normally $49. No, I can't see this price. I can't. Steam. Let me see the price you're trying to hide. Anyway, hold on. This part doesn't matter. The Planetary Annihilation is on sale right now. Now, Vlambeer, who has Nuclear Throne, which is currently also on early access, refuses to put their game on sale because the price they are charging, they believe, is a premium that ensures they get folks that are interested in participating in the early development of a video game and being a participant in that, and they also don't feel comfortable changing the price because it suggests that the game is more finished than it is. Like, they want to make the game cheaper to bring in more people to play it when the game is in a stage, aka finished, in order to do that, which I think is an interesting, I suppose, ethical. I guess maybe ethics maybe puts a little too much weight on it, but I think that is actually what those developers are trying to suss out, is the ethics of early access and sales culture and what you're saying when you put a in development game 2/3 cheaper than what you're currently charging for it.
And it is interesting to see companies kind of try and suss this out in a very public way, because pricing isn't something that you can really obscure from the public. Like, you have to put that out there, and trying to debate and conceptualize what the ethics of something like early access are in terms of sales and all this stuff. Like, this is fairly uncharted territory, and it's interesting to see how companies approach this stuff. I might tend to lean on Vlambeer's side on this one. I do think the idea of sales for early access stuff is a little weird. It does kind of, to me, imply a slightly more finished product, but maybe that's just my old thinking. I don't know. Maybe other people would disagree with me on this. I mean, again, the whole landscape for what early access is, what it means for the grand scheme of things, is still very much untested. Like, there are now a lot of early access games, but there weren't like even a year ago. So we are watching this all unfold in real time. We are watching these experiments happen, very much in plain view. And honestly, I kind of don't know what to make of it. A lot of it, like I'm still just sort of like I'm very hesitant to even jump in on most early access games unless it's for testing or like work stuff. Like I'm still sort of uncomfortable with the idea of paying for early access games just for my own amusement because I don't know. So something about it I still just don't completely trust yet, and I'm not sure if that's just because I'm used to paying for games that are done. The idea of slapping the early access badge on it just makes me feel a little wary of it, and I don't know if that's reasonable or not. I feel like I'm still trying to figure that out.
For me, I've got enough games that I haven't played that are already out. I don't need to add to that backlog with games that are done. That's my like very simple take on it is, washing aside all sorts of, certainly legitimate questions about early access and the ethics of it and why developers do it and why some genres are better suited than others. For me, it's like a really basic question of like I have X amount of time to play games. I don't need to add to that pile any more than at the pace that these games are hitting 1.0 and actually coming out.
Yeah, yeah. That's all I have to say about all that.
No, I'm going to force you to say 5 more minutes of it.
Okay.
Video Game King has a good question. It's kind of a tangentially related to the idea of early access game comes out and then it gets better, and obviously your opinion can change on it. Video Game King says, have you either of you ever changed your opinion on a game significantly after publishing a review of it? Now, I suspect that wouldn't change so much like the day after, where you're like, yep, oh, I was super wrong on that. But obviously, reviews are, I think a snapshot in time of how you felt about a game at that time, what games were like then, how you felt about it. But I think, I think you can have an opinion change over time. Is there a game that stands out for you that whether you liked or disliked that changed a little bit, like 5-10 years later?
Oh, there are lots of games that have changed a little bit. Like if I go back and I read any of my old GameSpot reviews, like I can certainly say, like I probably would have scored that a full point lower now or a full point higher, just kind of based on my growth and change of opinions about genres and types of games in general. There aren't any that I would say were super drastic. Like I would go back, like for instance, when I was reviewing Beyond Two Souls. I went back and I played some of Indigo Prophecy, which I had not played in a very, very long time. And I was very favorable toward that game when it came out because it seemed like a very novel thing. I gave it like an 8.4 or something, and I said a lot of stuff about the story that if I were to go back and play that game again now, I don't think I would necessarily be as kind to the story in that game. Because when I was like 22 and game stories weren't really much of a thing that were ever fleshed out at all, it seemed really impressive. Now, years later, yes, game narrative still has a lot of problems, but I feel like that game does not hold up to the light of video game storytelling nearly as well as it did back then. And also just kind of seeing some of the tricks and tropes that David Cage tends to employ throughout all of his games, that game seems less interesting to me in retrospect. But that said, it's not like a huge drastic thing. Like I would not score it as highly now, but I don't hate it all of a sudden. Like there isn't any game that I've gone all the way from saying, yeah, I really like this to totally hating it, or necessarily vice versa. It's usually like kind of more subtle shifts for me. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's kind of how I tend to be.
I think that's a really good example, actually, of like exactly what I was thinking about. Because yes, like your feelings on Indigo Prophecy may have soured or gone on an exponentially downward slope over time as you've learned more about David Cage and his storytelling ambitions, or his flaws as a creator have become more exposed as he's become more prominent and made more games. Nonetheless, in that moment in time when Indigo Prophecy was released, set against what games were trying to do or not trying to do, like, yeah, Indigo Prophecy goes completely off the rails at the end. But the things it was trying to do, the ambitions it had, were pretty amazing at the time. And that was worth celebrating. Like, sometimes, like, flawed ambition is worth celebrating, even if over time that flawed ambition becomes increasingly glaringly more flawed
Yeah,
than ambitious, because as time goes on, the ambition is replaced with games that do it better. So
exactly.
you can't look at it as glowingly 10 years later, because ambition is context, right? Like it's what it was like at the time, and unless you were there, unless you were playing the games at the time, knew what storytelling was like for games, there's no way to genuinely appreciate that. That's hard. That's the tough part about playing games out of sequence, especially if you weren't sort of like playing a lot of them in that era, is because there's just really no way to convey that. It's kind of just what it was like at the time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And for me, it's like it is just that sort of like developing tastes, like developing and also just sort of the advancements of of games in general, like that will naturally kind of sour you on some older things because they start to feel kind of antiquated and clunky in a way. But in the case of something like Indigo Prophecy, it is very much just about like my tastes kind of growing and sort of there being a lot more games that try to deliver that kind of narrative experience and doing it better. So yeah, like you said, it's just in retrospect, it doesn't have nearly the same impact. So yeah, if I was reviewing it now for some reason, I wouldn't give it anywhere near as high of a score. But at the time, when I was like 22, 23 years old, I hadn't played a lot of games like that at all. It seemed really refreshing and exciting and crazy. And I don't think that negates what I felt about it at the time. But yeah, I mean, some games just don't hold up the same way, and some games, in weird ways, kind of become better over time. I don't know. It's that's just kind of the nature of things. Like sometimes people discover things really later on and be like, hey, this is kind of actually an accidental piece of genius that nobody discovered. And some things that were great back in the day just don't hold up. That's the nature of all art, really.
Artist David Cage.
Yeah, David Cage's art. I don't know if you know that.
Sub O, any comment on Summer Games Done Quick? That was one of the stories I had pulled up. If nothing else than to congratulate them on raising $700,000 for charity over the couple of days of playing games really fast. And we should give a shout out to the Giant Bomb community for raising more than $6,000 for the dumb joke that a reader came up with, and then I helped get the ball rolling on, which was to name Mr. Jeff Gerstmann after Yoshi in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. There was a furious charity battle, as much as you can call raising money for charity a battle, between Jeff and another streamer, I think a speedrunner whose name currently escapes me, but it seemed like Jeff was in the lead, and then it went back and forth, and I mean, there were folks that contributed as much as $500 in individual donations to keep that joke alive. And at the end of the day, Jeff was named after Yoshi, and then it resulted in a very humorous video of no one really understanding what this joke was or why it was funny, and then also being like kind of upset when they discovered that it was about a guy who doesn't like Yoshi.
The best part of that video is the part where they mention the reviewer who gave Twilight Princess an 8.8, but they don't know that that's Jeff Gerst. Like, they don't put those pieces together.
It's wonderful. It's a wonderful
beautiful
thing to watch unfold. Like, to just watch it as an outsider is just it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And you know what? Like, Trihex, who's the guy who was not a fan of Jeff, is a great guy who does some amazing Yoshi's Island speedruns. Not everyone is aware of our tiny little bubble of the universe.
No.
It's very fun to watch that play out in other ways.
It's really great when our little bubble of the universe finds a way to infect the rest of the world, and that strain starts to spread a little bit. Like, I am always very glad when that happens, and in this case, it was for a good cause. It was a very exciting, wonderful thing to happen. I imagine Jeff thinks that's all pretty great. I imagine that in the grand scheme of things, Jeff is pretty glad that this is how it all turned out. Like, he'll play the grump. He'll be like, "Oh, why'd you name me after a Yoshi?" But no, deep down, Jeff's happy about it.
Yeah, so good for them, and good for the community for raising all that money for A really good cause and a really dumb joke. I couldn't ask for any. I was at a bar on Friday, like having to go to the outside area because there was bad cell signal inside. Just like, why do you keep running outside? It's like, oh, I can't explain why I'm doing that. That's going to be a nightmare to explain to the average person. I'm just looking at a charity thing that I was a part of, and then just left it at that.
That's probably the best way you could have delivered that.
Speaking of which, speaking of money, Dota 2 has raised $10 million for the upcoming international prize pool. It's part of Valve's, sort of crowdfunding that they've done in the past, where Valve basically forwards $250 to the prize pool for every $10 compendium that's purchased, as well as 25% of the money spent on compendium points. And the compendium is sort of like a Dota 2 almanac that people can purchase. But yeah, $10 million.
It's a really high number for a prize pool for a video game, and I understand that the international is a huge thing now. That Dota has a very large player base, that very big competitive scene. Like, all these things fit together. I get it. Still, that number attached to any sort of gaming competition still kind of just fucking blows my mind, man. That is crazy.
Yeah, and also Valve takes a cut of that stuff.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
So on one hand, yes, it's terrific. Look at all this money that's being raised to be given out to the highest level players of Dota 2, but also, man, Valve swimming in that cash. Yeah, good for them, I guess. Bungie announced that sort of the conclusion of this, the Wizards from the Moon arc of the joke that transfixed the internet for about a week, is that the bunch of the voice acting was not final. The upcoming betas of the game will reflect changes that have happened, and they also pushed back on this notion that Destiny had like a $500 million budget. I didn't read enough into how exactly they pushed back on that, but I'm not surprised that was a bit of an exaggerated figure.
Well, I felt like that number came out of a lot of people guesstimating what the marketing for that game is, because I think there was something that is, and maybe they're disputing this too, but there was something that established that at least a couple $100 million had been spent on development of that game, which that number by itself does not sound completely insane when you consider how many years that large of a team has been working on one game. Like, that's high, but sure, okay. The 500 I thought was them factoring in marketing and everything else, advertising for that game down the road, which is what a lot of film journalists will do now when they're talking about film budgets, because they're trying to factor in the budget for marketing, which is never in the actual film budget. So yeah,
right, yeah. I mean, that's one of those things where movies are, yes, more transparent than games in terms of in terms of how much it takes to make these things. But you're right. That's the gray area where when the box office numbers come out, whatever that makes back, you can't. It's not 1-to-1 with the budget, because the budget is just, especially in today's blockbuster marketing. The marketing budgets can sometimes exceed, or it seems like often exceed the budget just to make the thing in the first place.
Yeah, like, I would imagine that all of those Assassin's Creed games, especially 3, with the way they were advertising it, like, I wouldn't be surprised if they spent more on marketing that game, than actually making it. And I feel like that's starting to become much more of a regular thing. Like, the Call of Duty games, like, the amount of money they spend on marketing those games, I wouldn't be surprised if that exceeds what the development teams are spending making them.
That is true. Let's see. Let's try and pull out another question or two before we wrap it up, and this will be the one show that we do this week, because we get Friday off because of
we do, don't we? Shit.
Freedom and
freedom
stuff, and I don't know. I'm not going to question it. You take that day off, and you run with it.
I'm going to run with that day straight into drinking.
What are you doing for the 4th? You doing anything fancy?
I don't think I'm going to do anything on the 4th. There's supposed to be like thunderstorms that day here, so probably not a real good
Mm.
barbecue day. But I think there's stuff going on this weekend. So at some point, I will probably end up on a rooftop with a beer, and that will be
Hmm.
fun. So
Yeah, I go to my parents' lake house, and then I get to there's a we have some friends that have a private pier, and then I sit on a floaty in the water with the beer and watch the fireworks happen right above me. It's pretty good.
God, that sounds great.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's yeah, it's definitely one of the things I look forward to the most during the year. So thanks America for that. Definitely appreciate it. Yeah, I don't really see any other questions. Are you gonna play any games this week? Is there anything you're gonna catch up on with an extra day?
Oh, let's see. I'm gonna have a review of Valiant Hearts either today or tomorrow.
Okay, that's right. We
I
had to do work this week before we get
Yeah,
there.
I'm just about done with that game. I really like it still, so that will have a review soon. I will probably try and finish Shovel Knight. I have downloaded Broforce. I have not played Broforce yet. I'm going to play some Broforce. That is kind of all I have on my docket right now. I downloaded a couple things on Steam sale that I have not touched yet. I downloaded like Revengeance finally, so I think I might actually dig into that at some point. That's kind of all I got on my plate. How about you?
Lost Remnant has a good question, at least for myself. He says, I know you aren't too keen in early access, but any plans to play the alpha of The Forest? Yes, I do want to check that out. I will probably try and maybe give that a look during this coming weekend and maybe try and do an unfinished of that at some point. Some folks have suggested that could potentially be a cool bit for Spookin' with Scoops, but I don't know if there's enough to that game yet for it to function in that capacity, but there's probably enough there to put together a little video, and I've heard promising things about it, so yeah, look for that. Maybe not this week, but maybe next week. Yeah, I need to play Valiant Hearts. That's next up once I finish this one Ubisoft game. I'll move on to this other Ubisoft game.
Let me tell you, you are moving to better Ubisoft game.
Woo!
So you were moving up. Someone was asking anything from Vinny and I this week. I don't know. I'm going in tomorrow and Thursday. We'll see if we have time to shoot anything this week. Vinny is still setting up some stuff. I think we have some more shopping to do this week because we are now entering Q3. So we might actually have the budget freed up to do some of the equipment shopping we need to do. So
All right, tomorrow's July 1st.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's what?
we'll probably record ourselves doing some stuff this week, but I don't know if it'll go up this week or not. We'll see.
Cool. All right. Well, I think that we're going to bring this to a close. Yeah, we will not have a show on Friday because we will be America,
Yeah.
and then we'll be back on Monday though, and that'll be a week. So, Alex, I will talk to you then.
Happy freedom, Patrick.
Oh yeah, freedom.
Freedom. Yeah.